My name is First Sergeant Ron Gallavez. I'm the Assistant Chief Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police. I'd like to welcome you to this morning's press conference. Members of the media, members of the community, thank you for coming out and being present with us today. I'd like to make a couple of introductions first. Off to my left and to your right is Special Prosecutor Rick Hurdle. He will be presenting his findings here this morning. And also joining behind me over my right shoulder is Doug Carter, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, and Sergeant Ted Bonner, Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police in Bremen. Seated at the table here to my left is Mr. Hurdle's dedicated staff, and I'll allow him to make those introductions. After the presentation of his findings and his material, Mr. Hurdle will open this up for some questions, so long as they stay on topic with the topic at hand and things are in a professional and polite manner. We'll continue with that. You all received 2 documents this morning. Mr. Hurdle will address each of those documents individually during this press conference. So, with that being said, please let me introduce you to Special Prosecutor Rick Hurdle.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As First Sergeant said, my name is Rick Hurdle. I'm the prosecutor in Ripley County, appointed special prosecutor in these matters. A few housekeeping matters that I would like to take care of beforehand is there was some discussion prior to me taking the podium about speaking with some individuals with respect to the family. An offer was extended to both Ryan O'Neill and his attorneys. We spoke to them last night, as well as the family of Eric Logan. We spoke with a representative of theirs this morning. They were not able to attend last night. We spoke to him this morning. So that was done. So let's clarify that to begin with. A few acknowledgments should be made. First of all, the people seated to my left are members of my staff: Shane Tucker, Ryan Marshall, and Greg Merson. Those individuals spent extensive amounts of time aiding, assisting, writing, and researching the document that you have before you titled Findings of Special Prosecutor Rick Hurdle. So thank you for that. I also believe an acknowledgement should be extended to one of your detectives at Metro Homicide, Brian Cook. Brian Cook was the initial investigator in this matter and handled this until I was appointed, and then I asked the Indiana State Police to become involved. You should be proud of the work that Detective Cook did in this matter. He's a solid detective who did good work in this matter. And lastly, I want to acknowledge the Indiana State Police Superintendent, Doug Carter, who is right off of my right shoulder. Superintendent Carter took a call from me probably back in late June, early July, before my appointment in this matter, and I asked him, begged him, that if I were to be appointed, that he would allow me the use of detectives from the Versailles Post, which is where I'm from. And that was a contingency upon me accepting responsibility and making these decisions over the last several months. Superintendent Carter was gracious enough to allow his detectives to be a part of this. And with that, I want to say thank you. And those detectives, Rolfing, Tressler, and Baxter, spent countless hours investigating this matter, reinvestigating this matter, looking into what Brian Cook did, what South Bend Police Department did, what Metro Homicide did as well. So thank you for that. The way this morning is going to proceed is I'm going to outline my findings. That's the 25-page document that you were provided prior to coming in here. I'm going to summarize each section of that. I will take questions about that document as I finish. It is extensive, but I think it's important to discuss each and every portion of that. So with that, I don't think there is any disagreement that Ryan O'Neill shot and killed Eric Logan on June 16th, 2019. On June 24th, the prosecuting attorney, Ken Carter, he requested that a special prosecutor be involved in this matter. John Broden, the judge here, the circuit court judge, granted his request, and on July 3rd, I was appointed. The code set forth by Indiana statute requires me, as special prosecutor, to provide a set of findings, given that this is a public official. Ryan O'Neill was a South Bend Police Department sergeant at the time of the shooting. This meets that requirement. A couple provisions of the judge's order outlining that I think are important to discuss right now. I am appointed for the purpose of continuing the investigation, exercising prosecutorial discretion, all matters surrounding the officer-involved shooting of Mr. Logan on June 16, 2019. In order to conduct a thorough and independent review of the incident, and if necessary, consult with and retain experts that I deem necessary to facilitate an independent investigation of this matter. For those of you who don't know, I have no ties to South Bend. Detective Rolfing, Tressler, Baxter, no ties to South Bend. The expert that we hired in this matter, no ties to South Bend. It was my opinion that I was retained or that I was appointed in this matter is because I have no ties, and it is supposed to be an independent investigation, and in fact it was an independent investigation, and there was nothing, no ties, nothing done other than what you have in the report. The list of evidence, I think it is an exhaustive list. The detectives left no stone unturned. They include the South Bend Police Department reports, Metro Homicide reports, the body cam, the car cam of Sergeant O'Neill and the other officers, the hospital video, interviews of South Bend police officers who were at the scene by Metro Homicide, interviews of O'Neill, and a walkthrough of the scene by O'Neill. Interviews of the burglaries of who owned the cars that were broken into on June 15th into June 16th. Physical evidence at the scene. Evidence at Memorial and St. Joseph Hospital in Fort Wayne. Interview of the apartment manager at Central High Apartments, and the interview of a neighboring apartment building manager as well. A review of the shot spotter report. Radio traffic from the dispatch. 911 call recording. A review of the South Bend Police Department policies on use of force and body cam use. An interview with the use of force trainer at the South Bend Police Department. A phone conversation and report received from the body cam president who owns the company that sold the body cams to the South Bend Police Department. The autopsy report, the toxicology report, medical records from Eric Logan, medical records from Ryan O'Neill. Lab results, phone analysis, a thorough review from an independent expert by the name of Dr. William Smock, Logan's criminal history, and a review of the history of the personnel department of Sergeant Ryan O'Neill. Moving forward, this all occurred at the Central High Apartments, the address being 110 William Street, South Bend. This is where it all happened. Prior to Sergeant O'Neill arriving at the scene, there was a 911 call. That happened at 3:23 a.m. on June 16th. Officers were dispatched at 3:27, and at 3:30, O'Neill is at the scene. What happens when O'Neill meets Eric Logan at Central High Apartments? There's a black Honda. Its door is open on the driver's side. Legs are sticking out. It's 3:30 in the morning. O'Neill doesn't know who it is. He's there for break-ins. Gets out of the car, parks behind him, asks him, is that his car? The response, the individual gets out. That individual is Eric Logan. He gets out. He has a purse tucked under his arm. O'Neill said, is that your purse? In his other hand, O'Neill sees a knife. And this is a picture of the knife, obviously blown up. The knife is 8.5 inches long. That was in Logan's hand as O'Neill approached him. Orders him to drop the knife. He takes out his gun. He orders him to drop the knife. Logan does not drop the knife. O'Neill begins to back up. His car is parked behind where Logan is. Logan continues to walk toward him. O'Neill continues to back up, ordering him to drop the knife. He did not drop the knife. O'Neal fires twice. 3:31 a.m., O'Neal gets on the radio and tells dispatch to send an ambulance because shots have been fired. Multiple officers from the South Bend Police Department respond to the scene. Immediately 5, Lindsay, Canariki, Ryan, Vance, Nepper were the first ones to arrive. So 5 officers within about a minute to 2 minutes arrive at Central High Apartments. There is some discussion at that point in time, since the ambulance is not there, what should happen to Mr. Logan. They make a decision to do what's called a load and go. They put Logan in the back seat of Sergeant Nepper's car and drive him to Memorial Hospital, which is approximately a half mile to a mile away from the scene. As we go forward, you'll see what the independent expert made a decision and thought about the load and go as opposed to waiting for an ambulance. Mr. Logan's at the hospital at 3:34 a.m. At 9:50 that morning, he's pronounced dead. The following day, on June 17th, an autopsy is completed at the Fort Wayne Hospital, St. Joe. Dr. Wolf, a forensic pathologist, conducted that examination. He determined there was one gunshot wound. Not sure if it was the first bullet or the second bullet. It was front to back, right to left, and in a downward trajectory. He made a determination that was an indeterminate range, meaning over 4 feet. Eric Logan's bodily fluids were taken. He tested .143 blood alcohol content. He had cocaine and THC in his urine. Metro Homicide took the case over very quickly from South Bend Police Department. The scene was processed like many other scenes are. 2 empty shell casings were found at the scene, Central High Apartments. The knife, as you see there, a purse, a tissue, a wallet, and there was a bullet hole in a black Honda Civic that Logan had gotten out of. There were also bullet fragments found under a car immediately next to the black Civic. 2 fragments under a white Subaru. The area was canvassed by Metro Homicide and other police officers. A faceplate to a car stereo was located on a sidewalk within about 100 yards, and the trim outlining that faceplate was found also. Evidence at the hospital. O'Neal's gun was taken from him at the hospital, his magazines, and his ammunition. The bullet retrieved from Logan was collected also as evidence. His clothes, a gray t-shirt, and a black coat were also taken as evidence. Now, I mentioned the car faceplate. I mentioned the cars that were broken into. There were 7 cars in about a 2-block radius that had entry made to them on June 15th into the early morning hours of June 16th. Some had their windows broken out, some doors were just unlocked and they were just entered that way. There was a Mercury, a Honda, another Honda, a Toyota Scion, the black Honda that he was in, another Honda, and a Toyota. The faceplate from the car stereo was identified as the owner of the Mercury. She identified that. The owner of the 2013 Honda CR-V identified this knife as being his knife taken from his car. He did note, however, that the tip was intact when it was in his car. One other individual identified the purse and the wallet as hers that was located at the scene when O'Neal confronted Logan. A white phone charger with a frayed cord was identified by another victim who had the car. All in all, there were 7 cars, again, that were had forced entry on that evening.
Taking up all the damn accusations, no way out loud. I might want to hear that. Tell the truth about the officer killed my brother. That's what you need to do. Say he broke some damn car. He ain't broke no goddamn car. Sir just told that damn lie like that. Trying to finish with president ass police officer. Fuck that police officer. And I mean that shit. Fuck him. Fuck. Saying all these goddamn lies about my motherfucking brother. Weird ass bitches. All y'all prejudice. All y'all prejudice. Prejudice motherfuckers. All y'all bitches. All y'all prejudice like a motherfucker. And I mean that shit.
The lab analysis was done initially by the South Bend Police Department. The casings that were found at the scene came from Logan's gun. The bullet fragments that were found under the Subaru immediately next to the Honda Civic were unsuitable for comparison. They determined that O'Neal's gun was working properly. The Indiana State Police Laboratory conducted additional testing. His gun worked. The magazines fit into the gun, and the ammunition was working fine. Logan's gray t-shirt and his black coat were analyzed. There was a defect in the right abdomen and chest area. That was visually examined, it was microscopically examined, and it was chemically examined. There was no gunpowder residue located on that. Again, evidence that it was over 4 feet and indeterminate range. Swabs from Eric Logan were taken, swabs from Ryan O'Neal were taken, and 3 car owners. The knife and the faceplate did not have DNA and did not have fingerprints on those. The purse, the wallet, and the tissue, no DNA existed on any of that. The DNA that did exist was blood from Eric Logan on the white Subaru that was next to the Honda Civic. Logan's phone was analyzed by the St. Joseph Cybercrimes Unit. There were multiple images of car stereos and a conversation with an individual. The car stereos were located outside of the car. A ShotSpotter report was reviewed in this matter. A ShotSpotter is a mechanism where there's 64 acoustic sensors set up throughout this city area. They pick up gunshots, and a human analyzes each of those. It was determined that 2 shots were fired at 3:31 a.m. within a second of each other. And that's at the location where O'Neal confronted Logan. On Central High Apartments, there are multiple cameras mounted to the outside of the building. Metro Homicide questioned the manager at Central High Apartments to find out if they captured any of the video. The manager at Central High Apartments told Metro Homicide, and she later told the Indiana State Police when they went back to interview her, that the cameras had been disconnected for the last 5 years. The apartment complex had undergone renovation in the last 5 years, and the cameras had never been reinstalled or hooked up. So there is no video evidence from the actual cameras located on Central High Apartments. 1/2 block southwest of that is another complex. There are cameras there. The cameras there are motion censored. Metro Homicide questioned the apartment manager at that apartment complex. She went back and watched the videos. Metro Homicide asked if they could watch the videos. There were no motions detected. Eric Logan was not detected through those motion sensors on that apartment complex immediately to the south within a 1/2 block of Central High Apartments where the shooting took place.
Did you talk to Logan's family at all before all this, or the time span? Well, 3:30, when was the last time he was seen before?
We also, the South Bend Police Department protocol was examined on use of force. That's outlined in the document, the 25-page document. Not the entire use of force, but the provisions that are pertinent and relevant to what happened here. Metro Homicide also interviewed the use of force trainer employed by South Bend Police Department, who indicated too that O'Neill had been trained in use of force by the department. They're taught to meet deadly force with deadly force, and a knife is determined to be a deadly weapon. The body cam is an exhaustive discussion beginning on page 13 of the document. It goes on to page 17. There are policies and procedures set forth by the South Bend Police Department of when they should manually use the body cameras. There are also provisions that allow for the body cam to be automatically turned on. When the red and blue lights are on and they get out of the car, when a certain speed is reached, or if the body camera is on laying flat for a period of time. That combined with the manual operation could be done as well. I would cite you to the direct quotes from O'Neill as to why he did not use his body camera. Those quotes are taken directly from him. They are included in the report. There is no look-back period employed by the City of South Bend Police Department that would start before he manually turned it on. He turned it on at 3:33 a.m. He explains why he did that. There was a point in time that he muted it. He explains why he did that. Eric Logan's criminal history was reviewed. He had a prior conviction of dealing in cocaine. He was currently on probation for dealing in cocaine. There was an active warrant for his arrest. The warrant had been active for 10 months. It seems clear that Sergeant O'Neill was unaware of the Logan warrant at that time. Sergeant O'Neill had been a police officer for 19 years. He had 9 formal complaints against him. 3 of those were substantiated through an internal review process employed by the South Bend Police Department. Throughout the course of this investigation, it became pertinent to employ the use of an expert. We hired William Smock, a forensically trained doctor out of Louisville, who to our knowledge has no ties to the City of South Bend. He was provided everything that he asked for. The toxicology report, the autopsy, the state police investigation, Metro Homicide investigation. We had very few consultations other than providing him the materials. He had access to the interviews of the South Bend Police Department officers who arrived there. He had access to Sergeant O'Neill and the walkthrough that he did, as well as the interview. He makes a list of 14 findings that I think are appropriate to look at in this matter. He finds that Logan sustained a penetrating gunshot wound to the upper right abdomen. The range of fire with Logan's penetrating gunshot wound to the upper abdomen is distant, indeterminate, greater than 4 feet. The same finding as Dr. Wolf, the forensic pathologist who did the autopsy, found. Mr. Logan was struck by one of the 2 9mm rounds discharged by Sergeant O'Neill. I'm unable to determine if Logan was struck by the first or the second round. Logan was struck by a 9mm round discharged by O'Neill as he advanced toward him, armed with a deadly weapon, a sharp-edged knife. The wound path of the bullet entered Logan's right upper quadrant, traveled anterior to posterior, right to left, and superior to inferior. After perforating the liver, the bullet came to rest in the soft tissues of the back. The bullet trajectory is downward, approximately 30 degrees. The Gerber brand knife brandished and thrown by Mr. Logan is a dangerous sharp-edged weapon, capable of causing serious bodily injuries or even death. The knife is able to be penetrating Kevlar body armor. O'Neill sustained a pattern abrasion on his left forearm. That abrasion is consistent with the serrated edge of the knife pictured to my right. Logan was impaired and under the influence of alcohol when he was shot by O'Neill on June 16th. The decision by the South Bend Police Department to load and go and transport Logan in a police vehicle to Memorial Hospital of South Bend provided Mr. Logan with the optimal chances of survival. The shorter time period from injury to operating room, the lower the associated mortality from penetrating trauma. The use of deadly force by Sergeant O'Neill was justified based on the threat and imminent danger presented by the sharp-edged knife in the right hand of Mr. Logan. I agree with the findings and opinions of Dr. Wolf's forensic autopsy. This information was provided to me via report. His findings are contained in my report to Judge Broden. Understand that anything that is done, these findings are considered exculpatory Brady material that I would be required to turn over should there have been any criminal charge filed and used in the criminal case. As the document you have in front of you outlines the facts exhaustively, I think it's appropriate to apply those facts to what the state of the law is in Indiana, or was at the time of June 16th when all this happened. I think the law is still the same as it was then. It is my responsibility as prosecutor to prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt, not just in this case, but any case that I take in Ripley County or any other case. There is a presumption of innocence that follows every criminal defendant and at each stage of the process. As a prosecutor, I must disprove beyond a reasonable doubt any defenses, including self-defense. 3 questions that I'll ask myself: is the evidence admissible? Is the evidence sufficient to sustain a conviction? And can the defenses be disproved? Not just in this case, but every case. Self-defense applies to everyone in this room, including those in uniform. There is no duty to retreat in Indiana. Self-defense is a complete defense. Deadly force is justified when a person reasonably believes that force is necessary to prevent serious bodily injury to that person or another person. Or there's a commission of a forcible felony. Serious bodily injury and forcible felonies are both defined by the Indiana Code. Questions become, did O'Neal have a right to be where he was? Did he act without fault? And was he in reasonable fear or apprehension of death or great bodily harm? Those are questions that we had to decide, that I had to decide in moving forward of whether or not a criminal prosecution was possible. O'Neal must have had a subjective belief that he was going to sustain serious bodily injury, that he needed to prevent serious bodily injury. And that belief needed to be objective, meaning would a reasonable person in O'Neal's shoes feel that his life was threatened, that he was threatened with serious bodily injury. So there's a subjective component, what was O'Neal thinking? And there's an objective component, which is what would a reasonable person in O'Neal's shoes be thinking. Police officers in the state of Indiana are afforded an additional defense on top of self-defense. Officers' force is justifiable when the officer reasonably believes that force is necessary to effect a lawful arrest. And officers can use deadly force and there's no duty to retreat. The question there becomes, does probable cause exist that Logan was going to commit a forcible felony or that he intended to commit serious bodily injury to Ryan O'Neal? There are a number of factors, I believe 19 bullet points, that end my findings, that end my analysis. Those findings set forth why criminal prosecution is not possible in this matter. Those bullet points I point you to review and look at. I will take any questions at this point in
I have
time.
a question.
Yes, ma'am?
It seems as if your report kind of contradicts itself. It says here that when Logan threw the knife at him, I fucking shot him. But then it says here that he didn't shoot him, he shot him after he threw the knife. That's a major contradiction.
The contradiction is not in the report itself.
Yeah.
Yes, the contradiction
It is.
Let me speak. Would you like
Please.
to answer? Would you like me to
And I have
answer?
another question as well.
Let
Did
me-
you say there were 6 cars that were broken into? 7 cars?
Seven.
You said you had the fingerprints?
No
No DNA.
Oh, nothing.
That's
But
what
you
I said.
want us to believe that this is justice?
Would you like me to answer your question?
Absolutely.
So the report is not contradictory. What Sergeant O'Neal, when he turned on his body cam, he made a statement that the knife was thrown at him, so he shot him.
Mhm.
About 3 hours later, when he was interviewed by Metro Homicide, and he did a walkthrough, he said he shot him first, and then the knife was thrown.
So there's the contradiction.
The contradiction's
Absolutely.
not in the report.
There's the contradiction, sir. And you're telling us that without a reasonable doubt, you're saying that this blade, without a tip on it, you said in your report that it had a sharp end on it. That doesn't have a sharp end on it, sir. How many inches? Where's the purse? Where's the images of the purse that you said that Eric Logan possessed? Where is it? Where's the pictures?
The items were collected and placed into evidence, and they were analyzed.
Where's the picture? You brought the knife as to say that this is an object that can be used for deadly force, but clearly that is an object that anybody in this room can have in their possession. It's not against the law to have a knife.
I understand.
You have an officer that was on the force for 20 years that did not use his body cam, and you're saying that this is justifiable with this pocket knife that just can be used to cut lines for fishing.
for lines and fishing.
There's not a butt in on there, sir. That's not reasonable doubt, sir.
Yes, sir.
If this was a flip side and it was a citizen versus a police officer and their story didn't match, what would you do to the citizen? If a murder had occurred and it was a citizen, what would you do to the citizen if they had such flaws in their story as this guy did?
He'd be in jail right now.
I think,
I'll wait. I'm patient. I'll wait.
it might be improper for me to speculate on another set of facts.
Oh my God.
But what I'll ask you this.
Have you ever tried a citizen that had a similar situation to this? I have no problem looking up your history. Have you tried a citizen similar to this situation? Did you treat them as innocent as you're treating O'Neal?
As we discussed earlier, self-defense applies to you.
That's what I'm saying. Have you ever tried a citizen? Similar case. Have you ever tried a citizen and he got to go home?
I have not.
Right. You say that a man that just conducted prostitution, that upholds the law, just bought a prostitute just minutes before he went to kill a man that was walking home to his mother?
We're going to stick with what happened on June 16th first. Then
you were hired to do absolutely nothing.
Exactly. To peace and make everybody shut up. That's what it's all about. Satisfying
Can you show us the position that people were in when you
One
guys
second,
got
I'll get to you next. Let me, this gentleman.
So Mr. Logan threw the knife. He threw the knife before or after he was shot?
But let me say this, I think it's unclear whether the shooting happened before the knife was thrown or after.
It's not unclear. It's unclear here. Nothing's unclear here. Only thing that's unclear
Let's
is
speak
that
one
you're
at a time,
standing up
please.
here telling us lies.
Thank you.
All right, let's speak one at a time and keep order so we can keep questions.
Yeah, let's, one at a time. I understand that you have some concerns and questions.
Concerns?
But let me answer his question first, all right? So the question was the throwing of the knife first or the throwing of the knife after? Frankly, in my analysis, it doesn't matter. There's someone with a knife coming toward an armed police officer.
Which one is it?
He is allowed to use self-defense.
Was he coming towards you and throw the knife?
Which one was it? Which one was it?
Which one is it?
Which one was it?
Two reports. If it was a citizen, he'd be in jail right now, especially if he's a nigga. Let's be honest.
We waited since June. Since June for this?
Which one is it?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Did he
please.
throw the knife or did he approach him with the knife? Please answer me honestly, sir.
This gentleman still has the chance for it.
All right.
And if we want to ask questions, we have to keep it orderly.
He skipped me. I'm sitting here waiting for answers, and I was going to ask a question. He went on to the next guy. I got all that on video. I'm lying? You going to say that's a lie too, Mr. Prosecutor?
Right.
You going to say that's false too, sir? I'm still waiting on my answers.
Now, your
You
answer,
skipped
your
me.
answer was that self-defense applies to everyone, including police officers.
That was not my question. My question was not what the general law is or backing everybody else. My thing is if he was a citizen and the shoe was on the other foot and it was a black man that killed a white man, would you let him go? Would he have went home after he got booked for a couple of hours this morning and went home? Would you let that happen?
Would the community raise $80,000 for him?
What if he got out of the line, man?
Man in the back.
First, I'd like to say I would have loved like a 10-foot poster of the gun.
I'm sorry, y'all, for the outburst.
Because
Fuck this thing.
right here, you're making
Fuck
this,
this thing. It's a fucking
all of
lie.
us feel that this knife was super scary. I want to see a big picture of the gun.
Right.
Now you're telling us that what this officer did, you paid a prosecutor before he went and told Eric Logan, doesn't matter. If you're going to speculate for 10 minutes about all the cars in a mile radius that might have been broken into by Eric Logan, is that true?
We're sticking to
No,
what happened in the shooting. What would happen? What we're doing.
Then why did you bring it up? Because you are victimizing the victim.
Also, if I testify and my credibility is compromised, do I lose my credibility?
Yes.
Oh,
Should.
okay.
I would pull the
Sir,
line, not
yeah,
done.
could you, how come there is no illustration of where the bodies were as to protect you with the bullet? I mean, can you give us a visual on where the bodies were when he shot? I mean, you say 4 foot, that's tampering with evidence if he picked up the body.
Right.
So we don't know what the
Right.
angle was, where they were standing at from one another. Was he
The
laying
police
down,
officers
standing
took Eric
up?
Logan to the hospital to try and save his life.
Okay,
Shouldn't
but where
we not
were the
transport
bodies
somebody?
at the time of the shot?
The shift of the
Can you,
bullet.
can your experts tell us this?
Sir, do you have
Were they
a
both
question?
standing? Or was
Yes,
one
I do.
laying down?
Probably
They get no answer there.
everybody in the room except the Logan family met with the chief of police and the mayor. And the chief, South Bend Police Chief, advised, in your report, you say it was 2 cases. At the crime location, it was more than 2 cases out there as evidence, as well as the chief of police told the family and myself that there was O'Neal gun had 2 missing casings, but there was more casing at the crime scene. Can you explain that? I have 2 more after this.
I can't answer what the police chief did or did not do, what he told the family or what he did not tell the family.
What kind of investigation did you do?
The police chief did not do the investigation in this matter. If he did, I don't have it.
Was there blood found at that crime scene?
The blood that was found was on a white Subaru that was immediately next to the Honda Civic that Mr. Logan got out of.
All right, and you say that this started in the parking lot, correct?
Central High Apartments.
I know I talked to your office plenty of times last week about a witness that we have on video said South Bend police knocked on his door and told him to say that Eric Logan broke in his car. It was a blue car on William Street. Why that car not in this report?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So that investigation is tempered.
How much did they pay you?
I don't have that information.
But you don't have it, but I left that with your office. Why wouldn't you have it? Right.
Why wouldn't you?
No, I'm not done, sir. Oh, whoa. I'm not done. You skipped me. Can you answer that? You didn't answer that.
What was your question?
I left this detail with your office.
Why don't you have that?
Why don't you have that information? You're telling my community, my people of my race and other race, that you do not have this information. Where a police officer came, knocked on a white man's door, and said to tell people Eric Logan had a knife, a purse, and a radio. The man, it's on video. You know that.
This is the
I allow your office on my Facebook.
Okay. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sir.
Maybe it's the St. Joe County Prosecutor's Office.
Oh, no. Your office. I call. This is not somebody else. I call your office. And your Indiana police returned the phone call.
Okay.
Another one I have for you here.
Sir, I'll come back to you
Sir.
in a minute. There's a gentleman over here.
In terms of Ryan O'Neal's statements regarding the body camera policy, were you able to confirm whether those statements were actually in line with the policy? Because his quote said he believed for minor crimes or something of that nature, starting the body camera was not required. The policy says for field interviews and enforcement stops, it would be required in addition to self-initiated activity that would require him to notify dispatch. Was he correct in the way he described that policy?
I'll answer that to say that it's not within the scope of my authority to decide whether or not he followed policy or procedure or not. That's within the purview. That's within the purview of the South Bend Police Department, whether or not he followed policy or didn't follow policy.
Does whether he's following policy at the time factor at all into the legal analysis of the self-defense
Only if it would
law?
come into play with the whether or not it meets an element of a crime or doesn't meet an element of a crime. And so the policies that were in place, whether he followed or not, just is not relevant to my discussion and my decision. Back in the back, sir?
Yeah, I'm trying to, this is from the report. I'm trying to understand that the shooting came from more than 4 feet. The bullet trajectory is downward, which if you're charging with a knife, that would make sense. But if the knife has been thrown, why would somebody be crouching? This is a downward trajectory of a bullet.
Those are questions I can't answer. I don't know.
That's a problem. If you reenact the scene, and if I'm charging at you with a knife and I'm bent over, that would make sense that you would do that. But if it's that, I can't throw a knife bending forward.
That analysis was conducted by the expert from Louisville,
Well,
and
can
he
we
made
see
a
those?
determination that it was in a downward trajectory.
Was there any, sir,
You have it. You in the findings.
sir, other than,
Sir, yes, sir.
This is a report that I have. My name is Samuel Brown, want to go on record. I'm a community activist. I care about my community. I love my community. That's what I'm active in. Okay. My whole town, the city of South Bend, is just torn up right now. I got a 17-year-old, 275 pounds, good student, 3.7 in school. I gotta go home tonight and have a conversation with him. He get pulled over on the Lincoln Way quarter, the Western quarter. What do I tell him? How do he trust the officer that pulled him over? He's a big, massive kid. He wrestled in high school. I want to know, what do I tell him? You trust the officer? Don't be afraid that he might not leave there alive. I gotta have this talk with my grandson. What would you tell me, a black man, in the city of South Bend? What should I tell my grandson?
Our society is based on law and order. I would advise you to tell him to follow the law and the commands of a police officer.
If he don't, he gonna be scared. Because when you read this tomorrow in the paper or tonight, how do you have him to trust that that officer gonna write him a ticket and let him leave there safe? I can take it to you. We'll pay the ticket, and I can't pay for a life.
Like I said, I think you advising him to follow the law, because that's what our society is based on, following the law. Otherwise, we have chaos.
I done followed it for 70 years.
sir,
I'll let Superintendent Carter address that as well.
Everybody, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I understand, because I don't. I don't understand. Allow me, please finish. Sir, I'm sorry about that question. I can see the emotion in your eyes.
You can see my heart.
I can't, but I can see it come through your eyes and the way in which you're speaking. And I wish that there were absolute answers for me to give you. I can tell you that my profession is not without sin. It's not. So what we are trying to do in a way that we can bring some type of healing, sir, to your community here right in South Bend, Indiana. We went through great lengths to bring people here from far away, 3.5, almost 4 hours from here.
We don't care nothing about that.
But I do, ma'am.
We lost our family members out here. We don't care.
I'm trying to bring that beginning of peace to you.
It's a one-sided story.
And I know that no matter what I say or what I do, we're going to be wrong. I appreciate you. And I appreciate what you asked us. And I'm sorry that you had to ask me the question. I'm sorry about
Y'all not
that.
gonna keep on killing us.
All the world.
I got a question.
So I've got two short questions. Number one, when you started this conversation today and you referred to the gun that was used to kill him initially, and it's on video record obviously, you referred to a .40 caliber weapon. Later on in your conversation, when you talked about the bullets retrieved, you referred to a 9mm weapon. So that's a huge discrepancy. Also, just out of curiosity, did anybody look into the fact, I shoot on a regular basis, if a man who is 6'5" comes at me with a knife and I'm gonna shoot at him, and I'm trained to shoot in the torso, okay, to kill, my bullet is not gonna end up in the rocker panel of a vehicle less than 12 inches off of the ground. So where is the information on the bullet hole that was in that black car that was less than 12 inches off the ground? How did that trajectory get to be this far? We know the guy was in the car, bent over, and excuse me, but my back's bad, bent over in the car. It would Seemed pretty evident if somebody shot at him, bent over in a car, we'd have a bullet down there. Not if the gentleman was standing up and he's shooting for a torso shot. Where is all of this information?
That information was provided to an expert, a scientist, a laboratory. The findings are contained in the report. With respect, if I said 40 caliber, then I misspoke, but it's always been a 9mm. It's never, there's no discussion ever about a 40 caliber. So if I said that, I apologize. I misspoke.
You don't get to apologize. Y'all don't get to keep on changing y'all story. When we get prosecuted, we can't change our story. We want accountability.
We're gonna take one question from this lady in the red over here. She's had her hand up.
No,
That's fine, that's fine.
This may be a good transition to move to the probable cause affidavit, which was included in the documents that were provided to you. There's a 3-page probable cause affidavit, and now it's a criminal action. That's something that I can't speak to, but he was charged with official misconduct as a level 6 felony. He was charged with ghost employment, a level 6 felony, and indecent exposure, a class A misdemeanor.
What about her?
Why is it that you can, why can you talk about Eric Logan's history going way back, and you talk about 7 cars that you have no proof that he broke into, but you won't tell us the 9 complaints against the officer and the 3 that were substantiated. We have all these cameras here, we're talking about his character. We have 1 witness alive, which is that officer. The only other witness is dead. So if we're going to trust that he said it's self-defense, you need to tell us the 9 complaints against him and the 3 that were...
Sergeant O'Neill's personnel records were subpoenaed, and I received those through a court order. They contain confidential information.
Are they racist allegations?
And I would refer you to the South Bend Police Department if you have questions.
That talks to his character. He's the only witness alive.
You're supposed to be here for that purpose.
You told us about Eric Logan's case.
You speculated on these cars.
How are these charges tied to Eric Logan's death? Are they tied to his death at all?
No.
They came about through the state police investigation in this matter, and it was uncovered, and basically the investigation continued then. They're separate and distinct.
Why are we hearing about them today?
Why are you hearing about them today?
Why are we hearing about these 3 charges today?
Because I received clarification from a judge that I have authority to handle that prosecution as well. That only happened about 10 to 12 days ago. That's why you're hearing today.
Sir?
So he's not a good character.
What, was there any witness or evidence that was able to corroborate, other than Ryan O'Neill's statements, that Eric Logan was within the 21-foot rule? And
there's a multitude of evidence that was looked at and reviewed. If you're asking if there was an eyewitness who was there at the scene that saw anything, there was not.
I'm asking both. I mean, does the physical evidence definitively show that he was within 21 feet?
Well, I think that the location of the casings, the location of O'Neill's car, the location of the black Honda Civic that Logan was into, the blood on the Subaru, the bullet fragments underneath the Subaru, they lend to that, yes.
How far away was the police car from the Subaru and the black Honda?
It was approximately 23 feet.
And the blood was found
on the white Subaru.
Was there a breathalyzer done on Neil?
Not that I'm aware of.
But you gave a breathalyzer for Eric, though, right?
It was a toxicology report pursuant to the autopsy. Yes,
were there any minorities hired to assist in this investigation at all?
No. I don't believe that. There was only 1 person hired, and that was the expert out of Louisville. No one else was
your whole
hired.
team is I'm asking, was there anyone?
I wasn't hired either.
But you're here, so were there any minorities assisting in this investigation at all?
No.
No, thank you. Of course not.
Sir, can you speak to what difficulties, if any, it presents to an investigation when the only eyewitness who can speak to what happened is the subject of the investigation?
We work murder cases and other crimes all the time when there are no other witnesses, so I'm not sure that this is that much different than another type of crime where there are no other eyewitnesses to what happened. I mean, that's what happens.
Was Ryan O'Neal or any of the other South Bend police officers who were interviewed, were they able to say specifically where Eric Logan's body was before they did the load and go? At the
I
crime
don't believe
scene?
it's specifically where he was now, other than in the parking lot at Central High Apartments.
They didn't say how close he was to that white Subaru where the blood was found?
I don't believe so.
Was there any analysis done
Two
of?
more questions.
Was there any?
You say you coming back this way.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
family have one.
They keep coming back till they move him once he was shot. Everybody know that once somebody's shot, you do not move a body. The ambulance, the fire department is right around the corner from where he got shot at. Why would you pick up a 6'5", 250-pound man and put him in the back of a police car? You can't lay him down for him to be laid down. So why would you pick him up and sit him up and then move the bullet? Who picked him up and moved him and put him in a police car? Because one person could not do that. It had to take 2 or 3 people. But once again, my grandson is in the 7th grade. He knows. Do not move nobody once they've been shot. Why did they feel that? The prosecutor told me, remember 2 kids. Those are kids. This is a grown man. Why would you pick them up and move them? He had a better chance of living at the police, at the ambulance is right around the corner
That's not
than him coming, they're moving him.
That's not what a doctor said. The doctor said removing him from the scene and taking him to the hospital immediately.
And that's
fine.
fine.
How do you fit in there? How would he fit in there? The door's open.
Your last question.
Yes, I have 2. But piggyback to what she just said, when the mayor and the chief met with their family.
I'm not privy to any of those discussions.
Well, is it legal in the state of Indiana for a police officer to move a gunshot victim?
Is it legal?
Yes, the South Bend police chief said it's illegal.
I don't know what law he's citing to.
Sir,
I don't know what law he's citing to when they're trying to save a man's life.
Sir, I have one more question.
I have one more before you take that, sir. Sorry. Just one more on that. Where he was shot, back to what he said, you took my thing from me, good. But if Eric Logan is 6'5", and the bullet is underneath a car, that didn't raise a concern to you? That wasn't like, right flag. I just...
That's why they moved the body.
Cover it up.
All of the evidence was transferred to an expert to make an evaluation that was independent from Metro Homicide, from South Bend, and from me.
All right, thank you. And just last, before I take my seat, you heard today from me that we have a video of the crime scene, a car broken into, that the police allowed the owner get in the car, but it's not in your report. Can you reopen your investigation?
If there is additional evidence that somebody wants to provide to myself or the Indiana State Police, we will review it.
Just for record, it's on Bernardo Malone, that's Bernado, Malone, Malone, Facebook page, the night of the murder. Good job.
Sir, did the independent expert provide any analysis of why the bullet path was downward when it struck Eric Logan? Well, isn't that pertinent to analyzing the facts of the case?
If you will review his findings, you'll see how he outlines those findings and what he made the determination of how he made the determination that the bullet was in a downward trajectory.
But there's no explanation of the circumstances of what was happening that led to that trajectory.
Other than he was coming at O'Neal.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes this morning's press conference. Thank you again to the media, the public, and the members that were here.